Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. With me today is Shobhita Soor, CEO and founder of Legendary Foods, an alternative protein food tech delivering Africa's most sustainable, most nutritious, and most affordable animal protein. So just for our listeners today, I know a lot of us, like myself, I'm coming to you from North America, and we have a lot of listeners in Europe and some from Australia. We don't necessarily think about protein in terms of insect protein or larvae. And I think a lot of times, we see things through our Western lens of, ooh, I'm not sure I would want to eat that. But here's a reality. Shobhita is coming from us. Her organization is based in Ghana in Africa. And UNICEF highlights that more than 2/3 of households in West and Central Africa can't afford healthy diets. And 8 out of 10 children aged 6 to 23 months don't consume the necessary variety of food for optimal growth and development. So let's take our predominantly Western glasses off today and understand just how critical what Shobhita is working on is. So Shobhita, welcome. With that intro, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And tell us a little bit about your background, how you I'm fascinated because again, sorry, that Western lens of we don't see insects as protein, or most of us don't see it as protein. We see them as sort of bothersome, if you will. So how do you make that connection, and how do you make that leap from bothersome to a critical food supply component?
Yeah, sure. So I've always actually been an underdog person. I'm always going for like the underdog team if there's a sporting event or something, and I feel actually the work of insect agriculture is very much an underdog story, because we're taking this resource that many people have sort of disregarded as as a pest, as a disease vector, and we're actually transforming it into something of great value and something that can actually solve, or at least help to solve, many of the world's challenges. But to answer your question, I actually got into insect agriculture when I was at McGill University in Montreal. So I was studying law and business, and one of my colleagues at school contacted me to take part in a case competition where the challenge was come up with a social enterprise that addresses food security. And we came across this really interesting idea that many people in the world consume insects in some form intentionally as a source of nutrition, and that there were major issues around the supply chain in terms of it being seasonal, fragmented, very expensive, often food unsafe because it's foraged. And so we said, hey, why don't we disrupt this by actually farming the insects? And so that led to my first business, which is called Aspire Food Group, which is actually based in London, Ontario, the world's leader in cricket production globally, and primarily actually servicing pet food, which is a very interesting industry that also invites a lot of disruption when it comes to sustainability. And then I ultimately spun off to start Legendary Foods, where I wanted to take what I learned about the benefits, the potential of insect agriculture, but to a market where I knew people were already consuming an insect. So yeah, that's how I got into this.
And is there, okay, first of all, I got to say, kudos to McGill. We are Canadian based. I'm in Toronto. My home city is Montreal. So McGill University is in Montreal. I just got to say kudos to the work that they do and that we do in Canada. So that was, thank you for pointing that out. The other thing though, back to topic, what's your trigger though? I mean, you get into a case competition, you talk about being fascinated, but what makes you fascinated? I mean, what makes that trigger for somebody from, in Montreal going, yeah, insects, need to
Yeah.
look at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because, if you look at lobster was a food that in North America was given to prisoners. And now it's like one of the
Wow.
most expensive sort of delicacy, foods that we have. Same thing with sushi, right? Like if I had spoken to my grandparents' generation about eating raw fish when they were young, they would have probably thought that was, repulsive in many ways or unsafe. And so I think that really, in as much as we think that certain positions are entrenched, they're actually very adaptable also. And, you look at sort of the worst parts of the food industry where we've been convinced that really unhealthy foods are good for us and that's what we should be eating. I think the power of marketing, the power of storytelling can certainly help to shift the perspective to say, hey, this is a really nutritious source of protein, a nutritious source of great fats, micronutrients like minerals and vitamins. And how can we actually use this to enhance the well-being of people and also sort of enhance the well-being of the planet. Of course, there was also a lot of sort of the entrepreneur in me was also very excited to sort of pack my bags and venture out and see what was possible and take up the challenge in another part of the world.
Awesome. And that challenge is about supporting food sovereignty. So tell me what food sovereignty is then.
Yeah, sure. I think food sovereignty is still something that, we're unpacking in terms of what it means. And I think it means different things to different people. I think for me, and the work that I do, it's really about creating food systems that are more fair and equitable for the producers as well as for the consumers and as well as for the global ecosystem as a whole. And I think a lot of it is also about retaining value where the food is grown and where the food originates as well, and for it to be culturally respectful. And so I think with insects, we hit a lot of those factors because insect consumption is something that has happened, for centuries, for as long as mankind has existed, we've insects. And, with the work that we're doing here, we're taking an indigenous food and we're actually making it more available, more food safe as well, and democratizing access to it. The larva that we farm, for example, you could go to Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where you can go to most food markets and it's being sold for 30 to 35 US dollars a kilo. So it's a delicacy. It's a food that people love, that people revere for its taste, for its medicinal value. And our aim is to make that, much more accessible to people as well.
How do we help achieve food sovereignty then? You have a delicacy, you want to turn that into a staple, because I'm guessing it's an accessible delicacy. I'm guessing that insects are plentiful, and correct me if I'm wrong, but how do you take the plenty and get it out to people?
Yeah, I think that, in terms of how we can all support food sovereignty, I think we can all support food that is made on a smaller scale, food that is produced locally, and food that is also processed close to its origin. So I'll give you sort of an example that's really well known, which is cocoa. Ghana is actually the second largest exporter of cocoa in the world. Yet such little value around the cocoa remains in Ghana or remains at the farmer level. In fact, many farmers that are farming cocoa are living in abject poverty. And so really a lot of the value happens where, or a lot of the value is created at the processing site. And so, when you buy chocolate that's made in Ghana, for example, you're really helping to support a lot of the value creation staying close to the farmer. It's actually very ironic that most of the people that go hungry in the world are actually producing food. And it's extremely ironic because you would think, well, if you're producing food, then you shouldn't have to suffer of hunger. But that's actually not the case. And there's a lot of irony in that. And there's a lot that we can do to support sort of more sustainable and equitable food systems. In terms of the larva, what we do is we have a vertical farming system. So we've said, hey, this larva grows out in the wild, and basically, the larva turns into a weevil, which is the mom and the dad stage. So very much like a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, the same way a larva turns into a weevil. And so what we've done is we've created an ecosystem where the larva and the weevils really thrive, and they reproduce and they grow. And what we have done is to farm them in a vertical way. So it's much more space efficient, land efficient. We use minimal water, and we're able to then produce this in a much more resource efficient manner that also translates into the product being more accessible as well. In that process, we also create many jobs. We also secure offtake from smallholder farmers because we also need to feed our insects as well. So yeah, we have a system like that. And the last thing is really that we also produce a farm waste that's then turned into organic fertilizer. So we really try to keep like sort of a very circular approach to our farming system.
And just to get back to your last point, sort of to meld the two with what you talked about in the circular system, how do you give back to the economy, if you will? Because I think that, what you said is people who are producing so much rich food for the rest of the world are living in poverty. So how have you built that into the protein producing process that you have?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the protein process that we're using, a lot of our value proposition is around creating products that are more accessible for people, for communities, and also more nutritious. So we have two products that we actually make with the larva. So we sell the larva whole as it is, but we also sell it in other products. So the first one is a fortified biscuit. So the biscuit category is really growing fast in countries like Ghana and Nigeria. But they're very high in sugar. And so our biscuit is much lower in sugar. It's also high in protein, high in zinc. So it's a much better for you option. So therefore providing a lot more value to our customers. The other example is a condiment that we produce with the palm larva powder. And here, this is a condiment that's very generously used in Ghana. It's called shito. It's kind of used with the same generosity as guacamole or salsa, if you will. And it's traditionally made with fish powder that is usually imported. And so what we've done is we've replaced that with palm larva powder. And so that has made our product the most accessible one on the market in that product category. And also allows us to, like I said, create more jobs in terms of its production locally as well.
And so when you're producing these products and you talk about creating jobs locally, do you have multiple plants? Because again, you're sort of talking about being close to market. So is it made in a singular plant in Ghana and shipped, or how does that work?
Yeah, so right now what we do is we have a farm. So we have a vertical farming system where we farm the larva. And then that larva is processed into a powder or a paste. The paste goes into our cookies, can go into also a lot of baked goods. And then the powder goes into our condiment product. And yes, we are looking to expand our footprint outside of Ghana as well to other places where there are lots of palm trees in West and Central Africa and South Asia and the Amazon, because that's, of course, where you have consumption of the palm larva as well. So currently we have two facilities.
So Shobhita Soor, Legendary Foods, we're talking about food sovereignty, we're talking about insect protein. What you just said, really, I didn't understood what you said. I didn't understand it coming into the conversation that the protein took on a powder form as you processed it. I was thinking about the insects as a food group, which I think they are. But when you talk about protein, then is this something that becomes another protein powder additive to traditional baking or cooking? What is sort of the application of this?
Yeah, so there is, many of our customers buy the insect whole. So they're taking the palm larva home, they're adding it to their stew, their soups, which is eaten with rice or yam, etc. So it's really just another form of meat. In fact, the indigenous consumer of insects does not see it as a unique product category. So they're not thinking, oh, I'm an insect eater, I'm not an insect eater. They're really thinking this is just another form of meat. I eat beef, I eat chicken, I eat palm larva. Or for example, in other parts of Ghana, it might be I eat locusts, termites, and chicken, for example. So it's just really another form of animal source foods. And animal source foods are actually tied to better health outcomes, better productivity outcomes, better financial outcomes on the African continent. But yes, again, I would say, unfortunately, or fortunately, however, I think it can go either way, is in sub-Saharan Africa, there is no immunity from the food trends that we see globally, which is that there is a trend towards convenience foods, towards packaged foods, towards eating on the go, towards cooking less often. And so, you see a lot of snack products that are taking off. Snacking is not generally part of the culture. It's a very Western type of thing.
Yeah.
So because these products and these food trends are happening, we certainly see an opportunity, yes, to provide palm larva as a protein ingredient for import substitution. So what I mean by this is, for example, if you're a big food manufacturer here in West Africa and you're going to produce cereal mix on a large scale and you put milk powder into your cereal mix, that milk powder is going to be imported. And what happens is in an economy where the currency is rapidly depreciating, every time you import your milk powder, it's more and more expensive in local currency. And so that makes it more expensive for the final consumer. It causes a lot of shrinkflation practices as well. And so there is a deep need for scalable protein production in West Africa, just even to service food manufacturing. So to replace or to complement milk powder, fish powder, shrimp powder, a lot of these whey powder, a lot of these protein ingredients that are being used to produce a lot of convenience type of foods. So yes, this is an area where we see our ability to provide an alternative to those products that is more nutritious, more sustainable, and of course, local.
So let me ask this. This is a little bit off script, but you went to one of the best business schools in the world.
Yeah.
You were involved in business cases. So let me just ask this general business type question. I mean, tell us a little bit about the business and the social progress, because you're talking about the influx of the West, you're talking about snack foods, you're talking about growing industries. What is business and business life in Africa like today? How is it emerging?
Yeah, sure. I think that for sure, with technology, the internet, social media, there, and of course, Africa is very well known to have bypassed certain technologies. So traditional banking in terms of going into a bank, has really been sort of replaced with digitized banking, mobile banking, phone banking, or for example, phones, landlines are not common here, sort of went straight to cell phones. And as a result, social media and the internet provides, I think, people with an access to global markets and understanding what life is like in other parts of the world. And I see this as sort of a bilateral exchange. I think it also provides, the West or other parts of the world, the ability to have insight into what life is like in sub-Saharan Africa. I would say that, female entrepreneurship is very strong in Ghana. It's actually the leader in female entrepreneurship globally. Many traders, many of our customers, many of the people that we're buying inputs from are female. And so I think that that's really, really great to see. And I think that there is also a strong desire to see local economy and local industry flourish, because that does necessarily lead to jobs and lead to a stronger economy locally. So I would say, those are things that are great. And of course, the growth is really strong. Population growth is very strong in this part of the world, and so it definitely is the future, and definitely is where there are the most young people in the world, the most people that will be in need of a job, the most people that will be, sort of part of a very a very lively economic workforce.
So you raised a few things, and yes, I will get back on topic, but I think that the environment in which you're thriving, I think it's important to the conversation. Because as you talk to it, I wouldn't have thought of entrepreneurship, or specifically female entrepreneurship, being so strong. And, we look at the West, we look at the US more so even than Canada as being strong for entrepreneurship because of the ecosystems, and the give back from, hundreds of thousands of successful entrepreneurs. So how do you get that support? Is there community? Is there banking support? I mean, you have this amazing idea to attack malnutrition, to look at alternate sources of protein, but how do you get going in that climate?
Yeah, I think fortunately there's a great ecosystem of impact investors as well as development banks globally that are really looking to invest in sustainable agriculture, into opportunities that create employment, into how do we move to more sustainable diets, more sustainable consumption patterns. And so I think, yeah, there's, there is an ecosystem, and I think that the youth in Ghana also has created a very strong tech ecosystem that is flourishing. So you see a lot of, fintech, agri-tech businesses that are really taking off, and hubs, accelerator programs as well, many of which we've also benefited from, and had our team participate in, that have really built like a lot of skills, and also created a lot of opportunities for us in terms of access to funding, access to market as well.
Well, that's exciting to hear. And it really is. And I hope it opens a lot of people's eyes, because again, too many of our eyes are shut, or just not understanding. So in terms of Legendary Foods on its future, does that ecosystem help provide you a bridge to other markets, European markets, North American? Like, what is, and again, I know that you're a smaller local business, but I have the sense from, knowing you for just a short time, that you're very focused on growth and achievement. So what are the bridges available to you?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the regulation in Europe around insects is, a little bit strict, I would say.
Mhm.
And so they've taken the approach that insects are novel foods. And so each insect on its own merits must be sort of admitted as an acceptable novel food. And that process can take quite some time. And so for us, we see sort of the most attractive opportunities in West and Central Africa, in Southeast Asia, as well as South America. So we're really looking at markets that are poised for high growth, markets where there's already an openness to eating palm larvae.
Mhm.
There's already a strong understanding that this is a super nutritious food, and really a delight around, hey, Now we've taken this nutritious food and put it into a vehicle that is more convenient, whatever that may be. So that's really the focus for us. I think, of course, the time will come where we will look at the North American market. The powder is, of course, it's dairy free, it's soy free. And so I think that there are sort of certain performance markets that we can look at, as well as the oil in the palm larva is showing that it can be helpful for insulin sensitivity. And we know that right now there's sort of this, real interest in controlling our insulin levels, our glucose levels. And so, there's potential for it to be a therapeutic food as well. So yeah, I think there's lots of exciting opportunities, and we're not going to just stop at the palm larva. I think there's other really nutritious, delicious insects that we can look at as well.
Shobhita Soor, CEO and founder of Legendary Foods. It's been a pleasure. The 30 minutes has gone so quickly. I guess what I'm most fascinated, because obviously, as I said, I've known you 30 minutes now. Your enthusiasm, your passion, your curiosity is off the chart. You've gone from crickets in Canada, I believe, to palm larvae in Ghana. What does your future hold?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm really fueled by a desire for well-being, both for myself and for other people to experience that as well. I think that most of us live and don't experience what it feels like to feel well in our bodies and in our minds. And this is my deepest passion and what I care the most about. And I think access to protein is a key pillar to that. And so really, as long as I can keep working on how to get people to feel better in their bodies and their minds, I will feel fulfilled.
Shobhita, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, and I look forward to staying connected and having you back on as the company grows and expands.
Of course, that would be a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.